Mom of three and lover of travel, Reni talks to us about her daughter's experience on her gap year and what it was like to go through that process and to return back to post secondary afterwards. So, if you're curious about what this might look like for you or for your kid, take a listen to this story. Welcome to the Gap Year Podcast, where we explore the who, what, where, when, and why of gap years. It's real people sharing their stories, ideas, and experts diving deep into how you can make the right decisions in order to have a meaningful gap year. This is the place to be no matter where you are on your gap year journey. I'm Michelle Dittmer, your resident gap year expert. Let's jump right in. Today on the Gap Year Podcast, I'm speaking with Reni Walker, a parent who has an incredible message to share with us today. So, Reni, thank you for joining me on the podcast today.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm thrilled to be speaking with you.
So, maybe you could give the listeners a little bit of context as to why you wanted to share a little bit of your story and a little bit of your experience here today.
Sure. I do have a background in traveling. I started traveling when I was in my teens, and my first solo trip was as a 19-year-old. I just finished high school, and it was just a week at an all-inclusive resort, and it was really scary for me actually to do that. I remember at the time wanting to go, but also being very nervous about it. But the part of me that didn't want to be nervous about it won out, and I went, and my parents supported me. And again, it was just for a week, but um, it has stayed with me my entire life. And I'm in my 50s now, and the what I learned about myself in that one week away was really pivotal. So I have three kids now. The oldest is 21, and a 19-year-old and a 17-year-old, and two of the three love to travel, and that thrills me, but I also know how valuable that is. So it's I think it's easier for me because I do also have that love of travel, but um, I really do want to encourage them to explore the world and get as much out of it as they can.
I think it's so interesting when I talk to people, they always can pinpoint those experiences that have stuck with them. And I don't think I've had a single conversation where anybody said, sitting in that lecture hall, taking notes, it really stuck with me as something that changed my life. And yet, these stories of getting out there on your own and doing something that scares you and succeeding at it are stories that come up again and again.
For sure. And I do know, I can see in some of the choices that I've made that a big motivator for me has always been, I don't want to regret not taking that chance. So no, I share those experiences with my kids, and I tell them what motivates me to make the choices that I make. And I try to provide them with, the context, and to consider all of the aspects of making a choice, what you need to know, what you can know, what you don't know. And I really don't believe there are right or wrong choices. It's the right choice for you now. So um, two of my children, the eldest, have gone on gap years and have traveled during those gap years, and they were wonderful experiences, not because they were perfect, but because it really allowed them to learn a lot about themselves, what they like, what they don't like, what scares them, what doesn't scare them, and just taking on that. It's a lot of responsibility, and they really had to um, manage. Everything about their day-to-day experiences. Where are they eating? How are they getting somewhere? Do they have enough money? And you can't really replicate that experience. And I know that they're going to carry that forward, and it's impacted how they're now experiencing going to school and how they're managing their time, and it's taught them how to what to value and what to expect out of life, and it really has sort of made um, them hungry for more, and to want big experiences. And they're not. It's almost removed any complacency. Um, they're really taking charge of their learning. They're taking charge of their goals, because they can actually see how their work can achieve something for them.
I want to circle back to something you said at the beginning of your answer that I just want to really underscore for listeners. You said that you don't believe in right and wrong choices. You believe that it is the right choice for you now. I think one of the things that scares a lot of people about this transition from adolescence into adulthood is this fear of permanence, that you're making a decision that's going to define the rest of your life. And I think that's a little bit of a misnomer that we get caught up in as young people who don't necessarily have years and years of life experience behind them, and the pressure of peers who are all looking to move in a certain direction. And as parents, sometimes we can forget that as well. So,
Absolutely. And both of my daughters who took gap years each not confronted, but were confronted with people who were, maybe their age or slightly older, who were, slightly concerned that they were taking a year off. And the response was sort of like, "You're going to fall behind. Um, Everyone that you're studying with now is going to be a year ahead of you." Um, it's almost like there's one last space at university, one last job, one last opportunity. Um, and they had already decided to do that, and yes, we supported them, so they were comfortable in that decision. But it even shocked them that among their peers there was this feeling that you're going to fall behind. It's a race, and there's an end in sight. And I think they still needed to do some internal work around not sort of falling into that, I guess, belief pattern, that there will be jobs, there will be spaces in university. You're not racing anyone. It's more of a um, your own progress. You really do need to sort of measure it out yourself, and decide what are your goals, and how quickly are you hoping to gain them, and what is your pressure, what is motivating you to finish it. um, I would rather they take time to determine what they want to be doing and where they want to be going and what they want to be studying, rather than sort of hoping that they're going to finish something quickly and then move into a job quickly, and then perhaps down the road it wasn't the right choice and they're not happy.
and I don't think that all parents recognize that you can get so much clarity in 1 year that in the end, if you are worried about this race that you're racing to get to the end point, well, first of all, joke's on you. The end point
Hmm.
is a 30-40 year career.
Hmm.
And taking that time can save you time and money in the long run, because you can rule out things that maybe aren't the right fit, or a clearer direction on something that might be a better fit, or you've developed the life skills to be able to excel in whatever direction you choose to head afterwards.
Absolutely. And not every child will be able to have the same goals or achieve the same outcomes as perhaps your other children, or you, or the children in your life. So out of our three children, we have two who have had a gap year and who are university. It's not as clear with our son. He's 17. He's not a traveler. He likes his routine. He is comfortable at home, and he likes being with his friends. So we do encourage him to. Um, and yeah, we are encouraging him to take a gap year after when he finishes high school, because maybe he would enjoy a year of working before going and decide wherever he decides to go or whatever he decides to do. um, because I think there's just a lot of pressure on kids these days to and it is so very competitive, um, to move quickly through each of these phases. And I think that's actually when we really need to help our kids to slow down a little and remove that pressure that the world is putting on them, and say, within this space of our family, you can imagine all kinds of things, and it doesn't have to happen at anybody else's pace but your own.
I think that I just need to say that again, that each kid is unique and they are on a very different pathway and journey, and they are going to be ready for different things at different times in their life. And slowing down and reflecting and really finding out who you are and who you want to be as an adult, it's a very complicated process. There's a lot of reflection, there's a lot of life experience, and it's a big transition coming out of high school. And when we put that additional pressure of go hard, go fast, get there before other people, that isn't necessarily helpful to them to find out who they are and who they want to be.
For sure, and I think kids, they this they if we don't show them that there's another way of thinking, we have to model that. They might not know that they can take that approach, because that is such a big part of our culture and our society, that there is only so much opportunity available. And and I understand that it's a very competitive time, and certainly in universities it can feel like it's more competitive. But I think, um, like you were saying, you have to really look at your children and say, um, if this is where we're encouraging you to go, is that the right choice for you? And we have to take our our interests into account, but also their interests, and then try to find a middle ground. And honestly, to be frank, that was really, sort of, it wasn't always easy, but when I just kept bringing it back to, um, this is what I want, but what do I really, hope for her, or him, it allowed me to make sure that, my objectives were clear, that I wasn't, confusing what I wanted for her with what she ended up wanting for herself.
I was speaking at an event called Tech Under 20 for young people who are involved in the tech sector. And they asked what my biggest advice to these young people were. And the biggest advice I had was to clarify what their parents' expectations of them were and what their own expectations of themselves were. Because when those two things don't align, it can put so much pressure and stress on a young person's mental health. If they are trying to live up to their parents' expectations or heading in a particular direction because the parent is very overtly or inadvertently putting these ideas or these projections onto their kid, the kid can really start to shoulder that and it can start to feel very, very heavy. So I really like the idea that you were able to sit down and be reflective yourself and unpack what you wanted for your kid versus what they wanted. And as a parent, we all want what's best for our kids. And so there is that element of looking out for them and applying our grown up life experience to their lives. But that's not necessarily the be all and the end and the be all and the end all for these decisions in a young person's life.
Absolutely. And when you model that, I guess, thought process, um, it's surprising how kids can really own that themselves. So my older daughter, um, decided to take a gap year, and then attended university, and decided to do her 4 years over 5 years, because she realized she wanted to be able to do her best, manage her mental well-being, perhaps work in some additional travel, perhaps do some work, and she was able to um, create that all on her own. Where I remember when I was in university, I was doing um, an honors degree, but it was condensed into 3 years. And I just blindly sort of, went into this program, didn't think about the experience. I have such university was such a blur for me. Um, I remember just, churning through classes and programs, and um, it was about getting through. There were many, many classes that I could not attend because I was in a very demanding program, and I could not possibly keep up with everything that I was expected to do. And I look back and think, I wouldn't wish that on anybody. And I'm glad that she was able to, look at what she was experiencing and say, this is how I'm going to be managing it. And I think I think taking a year off really sort of removed her from that um, sort of feeling of having to move in lockstep with everyone around her. She just decided, she has ambitions of, getting a PhD, so she knows she's going to be in school for a while, and then now it's marching to her own drum. She has her own timelines. She knows what she wants to be doing, and she's just able to do it at her own pace.
I think that's a great way to look at it. And it's a great way to mirror how society is actually shifting as well. So, you talk about your experience about just getting through and just hammering through and accelerated and fast and putting in the time, not necessarily learning. And
Mhm.
that's reflective of this industrial revolution where you are a cog in this machine and you do what you're told and when you're told, and then the whole machine functions.
Mhm.
Whereas your daughter's experience is being able to create the life that she wants to lead by figuring out how to integrate the learning in meaningful ways, taking on a more holistic timetable where she can factor in the other things in her life that are important. And that ability to be able to manage that and to be the director of your own life is going to translate so well into the new workforce, which is shifting and evolving and changing as there are more fractional work opportunities where you may be piecing together several jobs, or you may be in the entrepreneurial space where you have to be a little bit more creative. So those skills that she gained in her gap year are now translating to her life as a student, will then again translate into the world of work when she gets there.
And it's all of those experiences. It's very hard to know which one is going to, really have the biggest impact. But it's hoping that your children are, um, you know, uh, experiencing these things. And my goal was never to protect them from the challenges or hard decisions, but really give them an opportunity and to know that you know there is a safety net in the sense that we support them, and there is only so far they will be able to fall with a family that wants them to be able to go out there and make decisions, and there was no concern on our end of um, it always being the right decision. The goal was here, be ready to take an opportunity. There's never a guarantee of success. Evaluate the risks. We don't want them to be making crazy choices or risky choices, but really, review what you're trying to do, and see what the possibilities are, what you can possibly gain, and then go for it. And I think that if I look back over my life or my career, I kind of wish that I had had more of that confidence to um, push myself, to have the confidence to not be afraid of failure. And I think that's what it all really comes down to when we're talking about making the right choice or the wrong choice. I mean, really, this is all that it is. It's do you choose this field over that field? Do you choose this university over that university? Do you choose this job or this position over that one? Um, what are the risks? What are the real risks in making a wrong decision? And I think if we really peel it back, um, almost everything is salvageable. There, if you are trying to make a choice based on what's making me happy, and is this taking me to a place that can offer me fulfillment, um, then I don't know how wrong you can go.
And I want to say that again, you don't know how wrong you can go, because there is very few things in your life that are going to be so cast in stone that they can't be rewritten.
Hmm.
And so I'm really glad that you brought that up. And I also want to highlight a couple of the things that you were just talking about. You were really describing the decision making process. And I work with so many young people that are paralyzed by making decisions because they have this fatalistic view of making a decision. Well, if I make this choice, that means that door is going to be closed forever. And so instead of making a decision, they just kind of circle around and around and around, and aren't prepared to commit. So I like that you pulled that out as kind of breaking that down a little bit into that decision making process. So being able to take a step back, to look at the situation, to evaluate realistically what are the risks, what are the benefits, and if I go down that path, can I adjust my path to get on a different track if it wasn't the exact right decision to make? Is there a detour that I can take to get in another direction? So I think that was just a phenomenal thing to really pull out of that last comment.
Yeah, and I think, I think adults need to learn that lesson, I mean, and I'm mid-career, and I speak to a lot of acquaintances and friends and people who are unhappy, and where their lives have gone or where their careers have gone, and I'm constantly not challenging people, but gently suggesting that it isn't too late. Or, I mean, honestly, for me, I would rather you sort of look at where you've come and say, what can I transfer? What skills can I take? And how do I transition this into something that will give me more joy? Um, and I haven't always been successful at that, but I have, managed to transition in and out of careers, and I am happy in the direction that I'm going. Um, I don't know that I would have been happy being in one job and one career that was just slowly moving forward. I think that's the nature of who I am. I need to shift things around. And could it have taken me higher or further in another avenue? Yes, I just don't know if that would have made me happier. So I think it depends on what your ultimate goal is, and what I've tried to sort of hold out as the goal for our children is, um, please focus on finding life work. That doesn't necessarily mean just paid work, but life work that um, gives you meaning, and where you feel you are making a contribution. So sometimes, again, you can get that through a paid job, but if you can't, then what else are you contributing? And that's the whole picture of a person. And travel is part of that, and volunteering is part of that, and community is part of that. So it's to me, it's got to be the bigger picture. It can't just be about what's your job.
And I like the approach that you're taking to looking at the whole life and not just necessarily beelining for a career or a paycheck in the end. And that's really a model that can be applied to a gap year as well. There are lots of people who spend their time working over the course of their gap year to earn money to pay for their post secondary, which is a very real and very large cost in a lot of cases. But spending time to develop the other parts of who you are really what's going to make the gap year so meaningful. So you mentioned work, you mentioned travel, you mentioned volunteerism, and personal development or personal exploration or picking up new hobbies, connecting with different communities. And that was another one that stood out for me, was when you were talking about a sense of community, because I think that is something that's really important to connect to, whether that is your local or your global community.
Oh, absolutely. So my older daughter who traveled, she did a 3-month volunteer experience in South Africa, and it was very powerful. She was volunteering in a nursery school with teachers who did not have a lot of resources, and what she found was that what the children wanted most was someone to play with. So there wasn't a lot of personal affection and play, and she didn't speak the language, but she had this fantastic connection with these children because she was fun, and that's what they needed the volunteers for, because the teachers were so busy with this, very full, busy school, and it cemented her um, um, understanding or belief that she wanted to work with children. And I think, it served a purpose because it also is a very um, valuable experience for her to have as she is applying for grad school and as she's working currently in research labs, and she's trying to um, um, she is competing with other students for limited roles. And now she has this experience where she has worked in a school environment and she has worked with children. And as she's trying to get a position as a research assistant, she has that. So, this wonderful experience that she had is now actually helping her to be more competitive.
As somebody who in former jobs hired a lot of recent grads, I can't even tell you how many resumes and CVs I just put to the side when they didn't have anything other than their school on their resume, because there's no way from a piece of paper to tell the difference whether you got your BA from Queen's or your BA from McMaster or UBC. If there's nothing differentiating you on your resume, then it's really hard to get your foot in the door. So there's got to be something that you've done in your life that makes you stand out enough to at least get an interview. And it doesn't necessarily have to be specifically in the field you're looking to go into. Like you were talking about applying this to research positions, but there's something there that made your daughter different, that gave her skills, hard and soft skills that she can apply, but also just a piece of interest about her, that in that interview that she gets, she's got something that she can relate to another human being and tell stories about.
Completely, and an insight into another part of the world, and how another part of the world lives, and um, we've always tried to teach our children that for the most part we can all look and say how fortunate we are, and appreciate what we have. And when you travel and you experience another culture, um, it's not necessarily to say to always see your good fortune, or how much more you have, but to get a wider sense of the world, because how we live and how we do things in Canada and in North America is it's very different. It just it's a it, you know when I've lived in Australia, I've lived in England, we've traveled around Europe. Europeans have a very different approach to life, and when we explore that and we experience it, it can really show you that this very competitive, work focused culture that we live in, it's not necessarily the way it is for everyone around the world. And you might find that this maybe is not for you. Maybe you want to experience life somewhere else and have a different reality. It doesn't have to be this. And so we really did want our children to also know that this is how things are here, but by exploring other cultures, you see that there's a lot of ways of doing things.
And there's a big buzzword now around global competency and intercultural understanding as skills that a lot of organizations are looking for. But as you say, it gives you a different perspective. And whether you decide you want to go and live in another country that has a particular attribute or culture that is more appealing to you, or you want to find a community locally that lives a different way, or even if you wanted to be part of the change in the culture that we have here, if you want to be instigating, like, starting the Canadian Gap Year Association, because
Hmm.
you recognize that there's something in your culture that you want to make a dent in. Those are things that are possible because you do have that perspective. But if you're accepting everything as status quo and applying your mental model to the rest of the world, that's when we end up in lots of trouble, politically, interculturally, interfaithly, and we can end up in a pretty messy world that doesn't have the same tolerance or understanding of the other people that inhabit this planet.
Absolutely. And I think, that we need more of that. We need more of people understanding that there's more than one way of doing things, that there are different perspectives, that we can benefit by understanding these different perspectives. Uh, uh, it's the more we know, and the more experiences we can feed into the goals that we have set for ourselves, whether they're personal or through our careers. That can only be beneficial. Nobody has all of the answers, and we shouldn't be expected to, but open yourself up to seeing what other ways there are of doing things.
I like that you said the more we know and the more experiences we have. We used to live in a knowledge society where the more knowledge you had, the more power and the more success you had. But now, with the access to the internet and open information that's just everywhere, it isn't necessarily about knowledge, but it is about those experiences that are going to help you to become a better person, a better citizen, and to lead a happier, more fulfilling life is tapping into those experiences and taking the learning and applying it to the different situations in your life. So I'm glad you mentioned knowledge and experiences and how they can work hand in hand to lead you towards your own goals.
For sure, and I think, we need to be honest with our children about how it's an ever evolving journey. I'm, as I think I mentioned, I'm still, looking for ways to, um, you know, fine tune, the work life balance, and what is it that I want out of my work, and is it able to satisfy all of the parts of me. And I have those conversations with my kids that, when you finish your first degree or your second degree or your third degree, um, that's not the end of it. You don't finish, and just now you have a job, and then you can stop thinking about it. You're constantly going to be having these check-ins where you say, is this where I want to be? Is this taking me where I want to go? Do I really want a job that, um, you know um, is constantly, perhaps, you're becoming more successful, and you're gaining more authority, but is that taking you to a place where you think you're going to be happy? Because maybe you want something else, and you have to be ready to assess that and make a decision to change. And there's no way you can have a career that spans 30-35 years and have it start in one place and go a very straight direction. I just don't think that you can see, from the very beginning, at the, you know early stages of your life, where you're going to want to be in 30-35 years. So they have to be willing to, be flexible. It's just something that I think, if we teach that to our kids, and if we model that with them, that we don't have all the answers, and it's sometimes we just have to, let ourselves be open to change. I think they can really be more in control of their life, as much as possible, and be, more flexible. And I think that, as the as the economy changes and as our society changes, that's going to be really important.
So, you have shared so much wisdom with us today about how you are setting up your kids for success. So, are there any tips that you could impart on some of the parents listening out there, or some of the young people who might be requesting of their parents to help them on their journey? For those who are considering taking a gap year, or those who are just in the midst of that transition from adolescence into adulthood. So, what advice would you give parents?
I think it's perhaps the most important advice would be to be a partner with your children as they explore this. Um, I don't personally believe that I don't think it's a good idea to say no, in the sense that for some children, no is just a sort of an invitation to do something anyway. So I always wanted my kids to feel like, let's talk about it. Let's review this together and see um, what your objective is. What are you looking for? So try to be involved with them. I really also believe it's important to share your concerns, um, and um, not in an alarmist way, but to be genuine and say, these are the things that worry me about this plan of yours. Um, Help me understand how perhaps I don't need to worry about this. So I think, um, if you have concerns about children traveling too far or being too far away, see if there's if you can achieve the same goal, a gap year. Maybe they travel closer to home. Maybe there's some work involved where you feel that it's not just a matter of having your child roaming around sort of and unreachable, but if there's some structure around it, see if you can be a partner in that thought process and that decision making, so that together you find something that you're comfortable with, and make sure that you're questioning um, if your fears are um, reasonable. I think it is natural to be afraid, but by the time they finish high school and that they're considering going into um, college or university, they really are adults. And the main objective for parents is to provide their children with the tools that they need to become adults. And university is quite challenging. It requires a lot of skill sets, and uh, by encouraging your kids to take a year to assess, um, spend some time either working or traveling or volunteering, you're giving them a little bit of time to uh, sort of acclimate from what happened in high school. It can be a lot of, it's a social time. It's a very busy time. They can decompress from that experience and then really evaluate what they want to accomplish. So just be a partner in that discussion, and make sure that your expectations are shared with them, and also that your fears are reasonable.
I like that you use the term partner, because we hear in the news all the time helicopter parents, snowplow parents that are being accused, or are um, trying to do things for their young person. And I think that we carry that forward from when our kids are young, and they do need us to do all of those things for them. And we need to slowly start to giving them more responsibility. If we want them to launch as a successful adult, we need to move from doing for to doing with, and then being that guide on the side that can be there for them to tap into when they need it. And that's the natural progression of parenting. And so for parents who may feel or may identify as the snowplow parent, or the helicopter parent, this is a really natural way to see how your role shifts as a parent, from being the one who's the provider to being one who's the partner, and then to being one who's the advisor on the side. So I think that's a really great tip that you've shared with parents. And I like that you said to be involved. This isn't just saying, okay, you're an adult now, good luck with life.
Hmm.
But you have life experience that you can share with your kid. But just answering no, you can't do that, or that's a bad idea, is going to be very detrimental to their development as a person, because they see you as a parent as such a wise person, and they will either rebel against you or they will just squash their own dreams and move on to something else. But if you can have that conversation where you can express your concerns and why you have those concerns and hear them out, because they may be able to convince you otherwise, or they may have additional pieces of information that can support you in shifting your perspective as well.
Absolutely. So I'll share an anecdote with you. So my one of my daughters preparing for her gap year, very, very excited about traveling to Europe, and had such beautiful, wonderful, high expectations for this. And because I know my daughter, I said, I just want you to be prepared for, the first couple of days you're going to arrive, you're going to be tired, um, and you will probably cry. So I don't want you to be stressed and overwhelmed when that happens. It's going to be okay. And I think it was probably the first day she arrived. She was in London. She was so excited. She went to the British Museum. This child loves museums, and she called me from a bathroom stall sobbing. And she was so tired from the jet lag. She was so overwhelmed at being in this city by herself, and she ignored all of those feelings that she was having and plowed through and went to the British Museum because that's what she thought she was going to want to do, having just arrived in London, and was completely overwhelmed. And I said to her, we talked about this. It's going to be okay. You do tend to cry when you're feeling tired and stressed, and it's natural. And you've got to give yourself time. And slowly, 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 it got better. It took quite a bit of time for her to understand what it was going to be like for her to travel alone. It took her about 2 weeks, and part of her felt very sad that she was, 2 weeks of this trip that she'd been planning months and months and months for, and that she was paying for, were spent not enjoying it 100%. And she really learned, how she has these high expectations, and that sometimes things, don't go the way she expects them to, and how is she going to deal with them? And having a little bit of a better understanding of herself, she really wants to be the type of person who can travel alone, but she realizes she really does like to travel with someone else, and she has to lose those judgments that she has about, what she thinks is a better experience. So it was just interesting because she had to really, she had to experience it. That was not something we could have just told her. She needed to live it to really understand it.
So I think that everybody can relate to that experience of feeling overwhelmed, and everybody has a moment in their life that they can connect back with where they are the equivalent of sitting there crying in London, and really having such a transformational experience and really learning a lot about ourselves through that lived experience. So just I am so grateful that you have been so open in sharing how you approached your parenting, how you approached the idea of a gap year, how you addressed some of the resistance that naturally comes up when you're taking a pathway that's different than other people. And I know that our audience might have some questions for you. So, is there a way that they could reach out to connect with you?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I'm happy to talk about the experience and just share, my thoughts. If you want to provide your listeners with my email address, that's great. I would love to discuss and share with people.
Wonderful. So I will include your email address in the show notes. So if you do have specific questions for Reni, but by all means, please do reach out. You have her permission to pick her brain a little bit and to get some support on this journey, because it's sometimes not easy to do it alone. So thank you so much for being here today and sharing your stories. I know the listeners will have so much food for thought to chew on for the next little bit as they support their young person.
Thanks so much, Michelle. It was a real pleasure talking to you.